പോളണ്ടിനെ കുറിച്ച് ഒരു അക്ഷരം മിണ്ടിപ്പോകരുത് എന്നാണ് is one of the most popular memes in Kerala. But unfortunately, or fortunately, today we are going to talk a great deal about Poland. But we are going to talk about the identity problem as a nation and as a people that Poland and Ukraine have. Because the problem of identity, whether it's the identity of individuals or of countries, are a major concern of our contemporary times. And especially in the case of nations which have been formed in the recent past, this has been exacerbated, especially if there are places which have been centers of wars, conflicts, and conquests. In Europe itself, the most intense form of this conflict can be seen in Eastern Europe, and especially in the case of Poland and Ukraine. Poland, a nation for hundreds of years, then becomes savagely partitioned because of the interaction of Germanic and Russian powers. It's partitioned again and again and exists as a nation only during periods of respite from them. And again, in the case of Ukraine, Ukraine was a nation, then it was conquered and became part of the Soviet Union. Again, it became a nation. And now, as we all know, it is an embattled nation fighting for its freedom against the powers, against the army of one of the greatest powers right now in the world. Nobody has a better understanding of this aspect of the conflict between Ukraine and Poland, the identity problem of the complex nature of the identity problem of Ukraine and Poland than the novelist Zanna Sloniowska. She was born in Lviv in Ukraine when it was part of the Soviet Union, and then she grew up when Ukraine became independent and as the citizen of an independent state. And then at 24, she comes from with Polish antecedents, but also has a connection with Russia, St. Petersburg, and Lithuania. And at the age of 24, she shifted to Poland in Krakow, where she is right now. But as she has said in an article in the New York Times, I left Ukraine, but Ukraine did not leave me. And we can see that in her first book, in the 2013 volume of photographs of pre-war Lviv that evokes the beauty and the complexity and the multiple identities, the plurality of Lviv itself. And then in 2014, she had a magnificent debut with her novel, The House with Stained Glass Windows. It was immediately noticed. It won the Schnack Publishers Prize for the Best Novel of the Year. It won the Conrad Prize for the Best Debut of the Year. It was shortlisted for the Nike Prize, which is possibly Poland's highest literary prize. And it was translated into English in a very sensitive translation by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. It was judged the best translation of any foreign novel by Warwick University. Her second novel, Island, was published in 2019. Further, a play of hers was staged, The Oscillation was staged in 2020. In 2021, she wrote a children's book about Ukraine itself called Introducing Ukraine. And right now, she is in the finishing stages of her third novel, which I think will be published in the next few months. So, Zanna Sloniowska, welcome to KA, the Mathrubhumi International Festival of Letters.
Thank you, Nagesh. It's an honor to be here, and thank you for invitation. I'm very happy to be here.
I'll begin with a kind of outline version of the novel itself. The novel, The House with Stained Glass Window, is a family saga of 4 generations of women spread over the history of Ukraine and Poland from around 1925 to 2013, when the Maidan massacre begins. But more than the people, the characters, the family, the 4 women involved, it is Lviv, which is the central character of the novel itself. And Lviv is emblematic of all the problems that that area had. Originally part of Poland, then when during the first partition of Poland in 1772, Galicia was conquered by the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It became a city known as Lemberg. Then after the First World War, it was given back to Poland when it became Lwów. I'm sure I get all the pronunciation of the city wrong, but Shana will correct me later. Then during the Second World War, it was first conquered by Russia, then conquered by Germany, then conquered again by Russia, and then it became part of Ukraine, and it was called Lwów. And after the collapse of the Soviet Union, it became Lviv, the original name. And she herself comes from Lviv. Lviv is the major character in the novel. But Shana, I want you to begin by talking about Lviv as a symbol of all the identity problems of Poland and Ukraine and its very traumatic, difficult history.
So I was born in Lviv, Lwów, Lemberg, in the city which has different names and which is a very multicultural, multilingual, multi-religious town. But while living there, I was not aware that this situation is special. It was very natural. For instance, but here in Kerala, you will understand me easily that people were speaking 3 languages, and that was, very natural. Why? So I was not aware that this place is so special. When I was 24, as you said, and I moved to Poland, which is now after World War II not multinational, not multi-religion. It's just Polish Poland. So when I moved, I noticed that my place was very different. I was not aware, and that was actually the reason why I started writing my novel. Because, and I started writing it in Polish because I really wanted to show Polish people this, my view on this city. Why? Because it is a part of a Polish legend. The city used to belong to Poland for 600 years, and Polish people think it's kind of entirely Polish. And again, Russia used to think it's a kind of entirely Russian, and it is Ukrainian. So it is so complicated, and I wanted to show this multiple perspective on the city. Yes, it is. What else can I say about that? It is now, when now we on war, everything is black and white. But when it is a peaceful time, people are able to practice their different identities and be different. Yeah.
You grew up in a school. You spoke Ukrainian. At home, you spoke Polish as well as Russian. You have a Russian connection too, because I think your
Yes.
great-grandparents met in St. Petersburg. You also have a Lithuanian connection. But I think in Kerala, in most states in Kerala, in India, we do speak, we are trilingual, but not in the problematic way that you have in Lviv. So can you talk a bit about the relationship between Poland and Ukraine, the conflicts, the traumas, things like that? Because you describe yourself as a Ukrainian-Polish writer, this hyphenated, but on the other hand, there have always been conflicts between Poland. Poland sometimes has been a very intolerant, parochial kind of place. But on the other hand, recently after the invasion, the Russian invasion, the Polish have been very welcoming of Ukrainians. I think the very meaning of the term has changed. Ukrainian earlier used to be other, wild, savage, Easterner, whereas now they are heroes, warriors, courageous people. So can you talk about the relationship between Ukrainians and Poles, Poland and Ukraine?
But starting with being trilingual, it was not problematic at all by that time when I was a child. I mean, it was very natural. Speaking Russian and Polish at home and speaking Ukrainian in the streets, and it was kind of, very natural situation. And it becomes complicated only when it is war. When there is no war, people can find their ways how to live peacefully. So as for Poland, after so it used to belong to Poland. Then there were partitions, three partitions of Poland in 18th century. Poland has been divided into three parts by Russia and Germany, Russia, Prussia, and Austro-Hungarian Empire, what now we call Germany and Austria. And when in 1918, after by the end of the First World War, Poland was about to gain independence, and but my town Lviv is a symbol of Polish identity. At the same time, it's a symbol of Ukrainian national identity. That was the reason. So, it's maybe hard to imagine that the same city is so precious for each of the nations. So, in 1918, 1st of November, the Ukrainians took over because the Austrians who were withdrawing the city, they gave symbolic keys of the city gave to Ukrainians, not to Polish, who were to became independent nation. So that was the moment when the Polish-Ukrainian war started. And sometimes they call it even civil war, because the nations are so close, and it was a very it was not a rare case when the sons from one family, one was fighting on the Polish side and the second son was fighting for Ukrainian side. So just to give you an idea how close people were by that time. And so Ukrainians lost the war. Poland became independent, and for next 20 years, Lviv or Lviv was a part of Second Polish Republic. But also to give you an idea about Lviv, during 20th century, it has changed its affiliation for 7 times. As you said, from the beginning, it was an Austro-Hungarian city, then it was Ukrainian, then it was again Polish. Then in 1939, the first Soviet occupation started. In 1941, the Germans came and the German occupation started. And in 1944, again, the Soviets took over and it became a Soviet town. And Polish people were, the Poles were forced and to leave the city, because after the Second World War, Poland has changed its border and it lost its eastern territories. So for next about 50 years it became Soviet town, and in 1991, when Ukraine gained its independence, it became a Ukrainian city, and now it still is. Yeah.
I think that conflict of brother against brother can be seen in the novel itself, where, for example, the grandmother Abba is extremely chauvinistically Polish, whereas the daughter Marianne is chauvinistically Ukrainian, even though she doesn't have a drop of Ukrainian blood in her. But on the other hand, the narrator herself is not seen as identifying herself with any side, either the Polish or the Ukrainian. So is the narrator representative of the fluidity of the identity in Ukraine and Poland. Can you talk about why you chose the narrator to have this kind of a situation, whereas the grandmother and the mother had very, very strongly. The grandmother, mother Marianne, for example, dies in 1988 fighting the Russians, and she becomes a kind of Ukrainian heroine.
Yes, I find that in a place like Lviv, those multicultural places, people are at the same time very nationalistic and very tolerant at the same time, which is a paradox, I know. So sometimes some people are very radically nationalistic, but some are extremely accepting. So it depends on a person, and it depends on a choice. Why a narrator? She's a young girl and she's completely lost because she just doesn't know who she is, because she was as a child, she was a kind of Soviet child, but at the same time there was this big legend of Polish Lvov. Her grandmother was very attached to this one, and her mother has died in this book for Ukrainian independence. By the way, this is not true, because by that time, when Soviet Union was about to collapse, and we had those peaceful manifestations, nobody was killed by that time, and that was my pure fantasy in this book. And later, during Maidan revolution, when I saw the dead bodies wrapped in the Ukrainian flags, I was not happy about this, my fantasy. You know, when I started my novel in 2010, it was really like out of the blue. If I would imagine that there will be a bloodshed like this, I would probably not write this, you know.
The novel begins with the death of Marianne and again ends with the Maidan massacre. And the structure is kind of circular structure. Most of the facts are given earlier there. It's in concentric kind of circles. I think it has been compared to the Russian embedded dolls earlier. And the chronology keeps shifting between the past and the present, begins in 1988, then goes back to 1925. Why did you choose this kind of a structure rather than a linear chronological structure?
I, maybe because I don't think that maybe this because of shaping identity is not a linear thing. I think it's always more complicated, and especially this shaping of Ukrainian identity, which I was observing during these years. It's not a linear thing. It's a very complicated entity.
And one more question about this narration. Why is the narrator nameless? You have not given a name for the narrator. It's always the I. Why did you keep her nameless in the novel?
Because I wanted very much the reader to be inside this narrator. Because when we are thinking about ourselves, I think we don't use the name. It's a kind of from inside. From inside, we see the world from inside. It's a special point of view, and that was my idea, to see with her eyes, not from outside, you know.
Generally, first novels are autobiographical, and there are a lot of autobiographical novels here. The narrator has this Russian background. The grandparents met in St. Petersburg, as I think your own great-grandparents met. There's a Lithuanian connection. But how much of the novel is autobiographical? How much is part of Ukrainian-Polish history?
So look, in fact, this novel is not autobiographical, but the starting point was my autobiography. I started writing with the facts I remember. For example, those peaceful anti-communist manifestations we used to have in by the end of 1980s. And while writing, I included, I have changed so many things, and and I hope it is a kind of generational portrait. I included the stories of friends and friends of my parents and neighbors there. So it's not a real story of my family, but a kind of a common portrait of many Lvivian people.
Generally, when the the Poles inside Ukraine were relocated, a great many actually went over to Poland. At that point, your family didn't. You remained Ukrainian. It's only later, when you were 24, that you went over to Poland. Why did you remain in Ukraine?
So only my grandmother was Polish, and that was the biggest tragedy of her life because she was Polish, but she was born in St. Petersburg, and when she moved to Lviv, only those who were born in pre-war Poland were allowed to go to Poland in the new borders. And she was born in Soviet Union, so she was trying hard. But apart from her ethnicity, she was not allowed to move to Poland. So actually, she never saw Poland, and Poland became a kind of legend, myth, an unreachable place, a paradise she was dreaming of. And actually, that was awful because I unconsciously accepted this myth, and I was thinking the same about Poland. And when I moved, I was disappointed because it's just a country, it's not a myth, it's not a legend, it's not a paradise.
Again, one question related to this movement, but going back to the mother, Marianne, she's an opera singer. Her voice dominates the novel. When actually in the first chapter she dies, everyone hopes that at least the voice will remain. And there's a constant presence of singers, especially the opera singer Solma Krushetskia. Is that how she's
Salome
pronounced?
Krushelnicka.
Is there throughout. And then for us outside Poland, see, Poland is the land of music of Chopin. It's the land of the poetry of Wisła Szymborska. And Wisła Szymborska's poetry, even when translated, is something that we can understand, appreciate, relate to. But I think when you went over to Poland, what you missed was the poetry and the music of Ukraine. I think you have talked about that. So can you talk about that?
So, I made the protagonist an opera singer because voice is a personification of the soul. This voice or being voiceless, it's something more than just singing or not singing. I start novel like this, with being voiceless, which means like the protagonist, she can speak, but she feels voiceless because she's closed inside of her, because her mother was a great opera singer, and her voice was the most important. Salome Krushelnicka is a very interesting character. She was Ukrainian, living in 19th century, but she became the great opera singer. She saved Puccini's opera Madame Butterfly, and she, again, for the Ukrainians, she's very important because although though she was so she was on those important world stages, she never abandoned this Ukrainian national identity. What else was the voice? What was
the other thing is, when you
yeah?
went to Poland, you missed the music and poetry.
Yes.
And that is
Yes, that's
very
true.
curious.
And one more important thing is that, as you probably know, the Ukrainians, they didn't have their own state till 1991, and as they were. They belonged to different powers, sometimes Russia, sometimes part of it was Turkey, sometimes it was Poland, Austro-Hungarian. So they had no own state, and their language was persecuted. Their identity was persecuted. So this Ukrainian folk singing, very often, that was the only way to express themselves and also to tell their story and to talk about history. So the folk songs, that was a kind of oral history. You know, when the Ukrainian books, for instance, in Russian Empire, they were banned, people were singing their stories and their great history. And that's even nowadays, Ukrainians still they are singing. For example, the well-known poets, they sing their poetry, which is not the case in Poland at all. So I was not aware that this is a singing nation while living there. But when I moved to Poland, after some time, I realized that nobody sings, and that was strange. And
That's very strange to all
Yeah.
of us coming from the land of Chopin.
yeah, but they play Chopin, but singing it's not
No, no,
playing
no.
Chopin. So, you know, actually now it's not so fashionable in Poland. They don't sing, and Ukrainians they still sing and still recite their poetry in a kind of like chanting, you know, in the same as the singing is, which is not the case in Poland. In Poland, poetry is something very intellectual and dry. You know, you work with your mind, but Ukrainians sing poetry with the whole of their bodies. No.
It's not just singing that's a major theme in the novel. The painting, sculpture, all of that. All the major characters seem to be either artists or people who want to be artists. Marianne's mother wanted to be a singer, but the great-grandmother didn't allow her to be a singer. Again, with the narrator, she loves painting, but she's not yet come into her own. So one theme of the novel seems to about the need to be an art. What can you say about the theme of art and artists in the novel?
So it is a very important theme of the novel, the conflict between being a political activist and being an artist. So is it possible to be at the same time political activist and still be an artist? I don't know. And the main protagonist thinks about it, observing her mother. The mother is an opera singer who at one point, when she sees the people on the streets, she sees the revolution, she decided that this art of opera is too elite, and she needs to give her art, her talent to the people. So she's singing on the street. And the daughter, the main protagonist, she thinks that maybe it's a wrong idea because she's losing her voice, all in all. And Mariana says that revolution is much more important than this elite art. And the daughter asked the question, is it true? Is it elite? What does it mean? Is it a good idea? But then finally, opera singer, her mother, she's dead. Yeah.
There's a great deal of symbolism in the novel, but one that strikes you very early on in the novel, in the chapter on the doors, is the white door described on the night that the great grandfather is arrested and taken away and never seen again, and that the white door is explicitly compared to Siberia, which is a very traumatic kind of episode as far as both Polish as well as Ukrainians are concerned, but both of them seem to react to the trauma in different kinds of ways. There seems to be a difference between the way the Polish see Russia and Ukrainians see Russia. Can you talk a bit about that?
I disagree here. I think it's very much the same.
Same.
Yes. This symbol of Siberia, this white cold place where people of culture or just people can't be sent and disappear. This is, I think, one of the greatest fear of both Polish and Ukrainian people.
But isn't there a sense where the Poles think that Russia is a bit further off, whereas the Ukrainians feel that they are so very close? Is there that kind of a sense as far as their relationship with Russia is concerned, that Russia is
Uh,
far away?
no, now when the war broke out, I think that there is a perfect understanding between Polish and Ukrainian people because of the history. At one point, when Poland joined the European Union and NATO, there was an illusion that it is far away, but geographically it's not.
Geographically it isn't, but
No.
psychologically isn't there that sense it's
Yes,
further
yes,
off than
psychological.
Ukraine?
But now with this war, I think that the Poles are very much that they have the same fears, and that's partly the reason why they support the Ukrainians in such a strong way.
You've already mentioned in 1918 the battle between Poland and Ukraine over Lviv. We have constantly been talking about identity in terms of Poles and Ukrainians, but in 1918, one third of Lviv were Jews. And there was this major pogrom against the Jews in 1918. Again, there was one in the early 40s. So, what's the role of the Jews in the identity of Lviv and of that area itself?
Yes, when I was thinking about the Polish-Ukrainian war, I was thinking that why the Jews were voiceless by that time. They were one third of the city, but nobody asked them, "Do you want to become Polish or to become Ukrainian?" Nobody asked them. That was by that time it was normal, let's say, and the Jews officially during those fightings they became neutral, but my question was, what about their hearts? Whom they were supported? And the Ukrainians were thinking they support Polish because very often the assimilated Jews were, for example, Polish speaking, and they were considering themselves as a part of Polish culture. But the Polish were suspicious, the Poles were suspicious that they support Ukrainians. And when the fightings were over, the brilliant Polish scholar Grzegorz Gauden recently published a book about this pogrom. The
The end of
Polish,
the illusion. The end of an illusion. Is that the book?
exactly,
Yeah.
the end of the illusion, and it's actually very difficult book because it shows that the Poles who were winners, this is their responsibility, this pogrom. And yeah, it's a shameful page of the history. But when I was writing my book, there was not clear, by that time, there was no clear information about this Polish responsibility. So in my book, I'm only asking the questions.
So now if you were writing it, would you change some of the chapters or writing now that you know much more of how more terrible it was than you knew at that time? Would it change the way? No.
I would not write a book because I'm so devastated with this bloodshed and with this war that it would not be possible.
Polish writers come to us in terms of, again, this paradoxical way in which most of us, the Polish writer that all of us know very well is Joseph Conrad, but he's part of the great English tradition, as F.R. Lewis said. And he, again, like you, was born in Ukraine, and he was Polish, and his second language was French, and his third language was English. And so, unlike many other nations, Ukraine has so many writers who write in so many other languages. Andrei Kurkov, for example, writes in Russian. There are a lot of writers who write in Yiddish. So a large number of people, Ukrainians, seem to write in other kinds of other languages. And in your case, when your novel was translated into Ukrainian, and I understand it was translated by one of the finest poets in Ukraine. It's a very
Yes.
sensitive translation. It was received as a Ukrainian novel rather than a Polish novel
Yes.
translated to Ukraine. So can you talk about this love affair with other languages that Ukrainians seem to have?
So look, the Ukrainians, they had they had no state. So for those who wanted to be in culture, there was the only possibility to write in other languages, to be a part of culture, because it was a kind of underground language, the Ukrainian language. Just to give you an example, for example, in Soviet Union, it was forbidden to translate Shakespeare into Ukrainian language. Just to give you one example, it was forbidden. Only now, when Ukraine gained independence, it became possible. So the Ukrainian language was persecuted, and mostly by Russians, but in the Second Polish Republic it was also the case. So all of those powers, they were suppressing this identity and this language. So those people who wanted to have their books published and to be a part of culture, they really had to change the language. And so this is the first thing. And as for me, that was a really great surprise, because I wrote this novel in Polish language because I was addressing to Polish people. I really wanted to show them my view on the city. That was my aim, actually, my first idea. And when it has been translated into Ukrainian language, I came back to my native city as a foreigner. I was, invited as a Polish writer, and I accepted this role. But then people started approaching me, and I noticed that they don't think that my novel is translated. They think that it has been written in Ukrainian, and for them it was very natural. It was such a pleasant surprise that I decided that I can have this complicated identity, not being only Polish writer, but being both.
But the identity crisis there is not, I think, just about Ukrainian and Polish, because the Orange Revolution was in part about whether you look eastward towards Russia or westward towards Europe. Did that change the concept of Ukrainian identity, the Orange Revolution?
Maybe I live in the bubble, but I don't know a person in Ukraine who wants to be a part of Russia. And yes, probably it's about those intellectual elites, but
But during the election, some of the leaders elected were people who were pro-Russia.
Yes, I know that those people exist. I never met them. And now with this war, I think that it's not a great number of those people left. But now we are talking about 2004. And by that time, some people were voting for pro-Russian candidate, but young people were protesting, and not only young, actually. Many people were. They took to the streets and they were protesting because they really very much wanted to be a part of Europe and European life.
The men in the novel are marginal, I think, shadowy kinds of characters. Even Mykola, for example, it's a novel completely dominated by the women. Why was that?
I was not aware of this. I was writing about people, and I was not aware that I write about women.
Women. Your second novel, The Island, is a very different novel. It doesn't have the larger political resonances of the earlier novel. It's about a personal relationship between two people. Why did you change your track so completely, possibly?
So look, I'm an artist, and that's I felt that I want to do something completely different, and that was very interesting task for me to explain, to explore the relations apart from the political and historical situation. So I'm very happy with this novel, but my publishers and translators expected me to go on writing on Ukrainian history, on this complicated
Is that
identity.
why there is no English translation even now of
Yes,
the novel?
yes, but I think that artists must be free, because otherwise something bad will happen.
I understand that your forthcoming novel is about an aspect of Polish history that very few people know. It's about Poles who emigrated to South Africa and created farms there. But it's also about a very curious fact, Poles coming back to Poland to dig the treasure that they buried earlier. It's a very curious kind of theme. Can you say something about that?
Yes, it's a really very interesting story. So some aristocrats of Polish origin before World War II, they were landlords in Western Ukraine, but by that time it was part of Poland. And when the war broke out in 1939, they lost everything. They were fighting with English, British army, and after the Western Ukraine became a part of Soviet Union, for them it was not possible to come back to their homes. They lost all the land. So for some of them, it was an interesting offer to come to South Africa and start farming there. So some families, they were friends. They moved to South Africa and they started new life there. And I met some people who were children of those people, but they were very attached to their Polish and Ukrainian roots. And that's how I went to South Africa. I met them. We were talking. And at one point, one guy told me about the silver buried in Ukrainian soil that the ancestors left when fleeing in 1939. So that's how the story began.
And the treasure hunt?
Yeah, the treasure hunt is a part of the story, but it's mostly about identity and history.
And when is this book likely to be published?
I hope next year.
I think there's an interesting way in which you got your first book published. There's a story of an accidental meeting, the publisher, and then you had written the novel, and then you met someone at a party, something like that, and that was how your first novel.
You know, I was writing my first novel for 5 or 7 years, so it's really long writing, and I was very concerned about the publishing. Is it possible that someone will publish it? And you know, my Polish language is special because I was not attending the Polish school. I know Polish, but I'm not formed by Polish system. So I have a different approach to the language, and that also was my concern. Because Poland is not such a country as, for instance, Germany and France, where there is a second generations of the writers of different origins, so they have them already. In Poland, I was the first one, the first writer who write in Polish and but comes from outside. I just accidentally I met a publisher, my future publisher, just a red-haired woman of my age at the party. And I approached her and I told her, can I send you my manuscript? But it was not ready by that time. And she told yes, like not taking it seriously. And I sent it, and it was really rough material. It was not, and she wrote me back immediately. Just go on. that's for sure that we will publish it. And that was such an encouraging fact for me.
So that's how the sensational novel came to be published in 2014. But now I think I've been asked to give the floor over to the audience.
Sorry, because without reading a book, no, I am not able to pass any comments on that. But coming to the, serious crisis between Russia and Ukraine, say with all the complex identity crisis, I would like to know, where the mind of the Ukrainian people, the majority, the largest section of Ukrainian people, so whether they want to sort out their, ethnic identities, or they want to step into the larger world of NATO, because that is the mostly the apprehension of Russia. Russia feels that sooner or later Ukraine may land up in the basket of NATO. So what do you think the inclination of the people, larger section of Ukrainian people living there in Ukraine?
Such a destruction and such a devastation, and it's always about being black and white. It's a very bad thing very bad thing for everyone. And when before the war, before the invasion, people were much more relaxed about their identity. They are Ukrainians, but still it was possible to be both, for example, Polish and Ukrainian, to be Jewish and Ukrainian, to practice multiple identities. But now, when this community is endangered, when the bombs are falling, when the children are dying, people are radicalizing. For example, a big part of Ukraine was Russian-speaking, but their identity was Ukrainian. But they were Russian-speaking in terms of language. But now it's in official situation, no one is Russian-speaking. People just reject the language. People are throwing away the books of Russian literature, which is a stupid thing to do. But when the bombs and rockets are falling on the city and the people are dying, people are very bitter and people are suffering. And that's how this identity becomes much more, much more Ukrainian, because this is a question of how to survive.
We have a situation, currently the war and the previous war. So what can you connect between both the wars regarding the common people? Like the war which is in her novel, which she's mentioning in the novel, and this war currently, what can you connect between the common people or the world leaders?
You mean the
Good or bad?
You
Yeah.
mean the
Anything?
Polish-Ukrainian War,
Yes.
1918? So no, there is. I think there is no connection. The Ukrainian writer Yuri Andrukhovich called the Polish-Ukrainian War the last civilized war of the 20th century, because that was a really very small war, and people. As I said earlier, very often there were people from the same family, and very often they were really respecting each other. But now it's a pure invasion of great power, which have big weapons, and to much smaller country, which is now endangered and suffering. So no, there is no connection. I don't think so.
How is Vasily Grossman regarded there? I've been reading him. He's an Ukrainian writer, Vasily Grossman. Can you tell me how he's regarded there?
Yeah, he was widely read, for sure, but because he writes about World War II, and I think he's a great writer. What else can I say? He's in this classical canon.
I ask because there's a whole set of notes about his coverage on the Ukrainian side. I mean, during the World War, how when Hitler came and that infamous famine happened, all that history comes down from his notes. Actually, I've been rereading him. We didn't get him till recently. I don't think he is even much known here. But I've been trying to read up about him. So I wondered whether he was known. He was suppressed by Stalin, and later he was discovered by the West, and that's how his books came out. So I wondered how, if he is in demand, if he's being read now.
That's for sure. But what I don't know, how it was in previous generations, that I don't know. What I know that in English he is was the same publisher as me, the Smackelhouse Press, because I saw his books on their web page. And yes, he is widely known. And as for famine, you mentioned, it's not only him. There are more writers, but it was a taboo. It was a taboo till recently. I mean, till the collapse of Soviet Union. That a great Ukrainian famine, when several millions of people died, and we still don't know the exact number. 1932, 1933. That was such a huge taboo during Soviet times. And just to give you an illustration, for instance, many grandmothers of my friends were they were very fat. That one thing. And the second thing, they were gathering, collecting food, and their families were mocking. It was funny fact, and nobody, and because that was a taboo, so it was not possible. They were never tell that they saw famine, and that's the reason why they have this eating disorders, and why do they have this enormous food storages in their homes.
Putin just denied the existence of a Ukrainian nationality. He just told that it's a Russian identity of Orthodox Christianity and plus the Russian-speaking people. So he told that when Ukraine was formed, to create a Ukrainian nationality, the leaders of the newly formed Ukraine turned to Nazis. So all the soldiers fought in the war, or the SS fighters were picked as national heroes. And recently we saw the soldier from the SS being congratulated in the Canadian Parliament. So on the context of the war and from the interview, as the Russian president, obviously his narrative will be to deny Ukrainian existence, but nationality. So can you please comment on the Ukrainian nationality and the neo-Nazism as I replied to Mr. Putin?
Almost nobody knows that during the World War II, in Red Army, they were mostly people of Ukrainian nationality who were killed, but within Russian army. So they call them Russians, but they were mostly Ukrainians. You know, this is like number, the biggest number of soldiers who were fighting, just to give you an idea. And those you are saying about this Nazi formation, which was SS Division SS Galician. That was a tiny thing formed in 1944 in Lviv by a governor, Nazi governor, Otto von Wächter. And it was just about, I don't remember, 200 or 400 people, you know, who were fighting. And it's not only about Ukrainian nation, this episode, the same episode, but much bigger, had Croatians or Latvian people and many nations, you know. So yes, it's a shameful episode within Ukrainian history, but it's a small thing compared to the whole picture. And Putin is using it to call all the Ukrainians Nazi. But there is no Nazi in Ukraine. It was a peaceful. It was a peaceful nation where all people of different origins were peacefully lived together, and there was no problem. I never met any Nazi in Ukraine, and I will tell you more. Putin says that he's defending Russian-speaking minority, but all the Russian speaking whom I knew as a Russian speaking now are Ukrainian speaking because of Putin. Nobody wants to use Russian language.
I'm afraid there's no time for any more questions. So, Zanna Sloniowska, it was a pleasure having you here at the Mathrubhumi International Festival of Letters. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nagesh.